Welcome back. Are you ready to rumble? All right, that's a really bad sports announcement there. But that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about, are you ready for conflict? Are you ready to go? Bam! Am I ready? Am I ready to get in there and deal with this conflict? And that's what we're going to focus on today. I've taken this great class. I've learned all kinds of really cool stuff. Am I ready to go in there and deal with this conflict? So there's a couple of things you need to keep in mind when you're looking for that. The first thing is, what are your skills? Now remember, conflict is something that we get better at. When we first deal with conflict, it's a little harder. We don't know what we're doing. In fact, think of children. Children typically often will need parental or some kind of adult help in learning how to work through resolutions. And then hopefully we'll take those skills and move forward with them. And hopefully as adults, we have some of those skills. I'm sure we all know a few adults that could use a few more skills, but where are our skills in dealing with that conflict? Am I ready? Have I learned what I needed to learn? Do I know what I need to know in being able to deal with conflict successfully? What are the other party's skills? This person I'm coming to have this conflict with, are they ready to deal with the conflict in a healthy way? That's important to know. What is your role in the situation? This is really important to understand as well. So not just the conflict with me as a person, but with me in my role. Am I the boss? Am I a peer? Am I a client? What is my role? And what do I need to know about my role in that conflict to keep in mind, as well as my own personal feelings that I'm bringing to the table? And sometimes that may require special skills. If it's a negotiation or something like that, what are you allowed to commit to? What are you, do you need to go to another party to find out if that's okay or not? Have you done your homework? This is really important too. One of the things that I find in many, many years in working in different industries is that when a conflict arises, it's usually only a small element of what really happens. I hear so many stories and I hear so much stuff. And I have learned to take 90% of it with a very large grain of salt, because it's almost never what somebody says. By the time you get it, it's been reverbed and renditioned so many times. It's only an element of what really happened. And that element is still tainted with the people's impressions and the drama and somebody else's feelings and what they added to it. And so what really happened? What is the real conflict? What are just the facts? What do I need to deal with here? Whether I like the person or not probably doesn't have relevancy. What somebody else thinks about it, what somebody did 10 years ago, what is the conflict that we are here to address, zoning it into just that? And what are the facts surrounding that? Have I done my homework? If this person does that, do they do it in other settings? Do other people do that in this setting? Am I looking at the entire picture here as opposed to one exclusive event to make sure that I'm really prepared to deal with the conflict at hand? After that, I want to encourage you to rehearse. And that may sound silly, and I'm not saying get in front of your video camera, but that would be great, or your mirror, but that would be great too. But really rehearse and take it seriously. Because a couple of things happen. When we go to a conflict, we got stuff. I got stuff. I am angry. I am upset. I am hurt. I am something. Go into it. So the more I rehearse, the more I get some of that stuff out. So I get it out first. It is out and I can leave it at home. I can park it in my car. I don't have to take it to the proverbial table. So practicing also makes us more aware of it. This is where I get emotional. This is where this happens. How do I learn to control for that? So it also helps us to bring our awareness of, I didn't think about that, or this thing came to me. So practicing makes a lot of difference. It really does. Practice with a friend if you can. If you can't, practice with yourself. Practice with your mirror. Practice with your stuffed animal. Practice with your dog. But practice. It will help. It really, really will. And the other part here is, are you taking responsibility for your part in this action? So this is something that's really important too. If we're going to go to a conflict, we need to be grown-ups and we need to say, what is my role here? What did I do that contributed to this? Whether it's bad or good or just conditional. It could have just been, I'm the boss and so I'm here. But what is my role? And how is my role perceived by the other person? So when I am coming into this conflict, how are they seeing me? How do I want them to see me? What approach do I take that is most likely going to get us to the results that we want to get to? You greet somebody off the bat with a negative perception, and it can resolve. This does not, and these conflicts can go on forever. Quite frankly, the conflicts often take so much more out of us than the event themselves. So let's be really good at understanding that. What do I need to own in this? And owning it and being responsible for it. Something else you want to be aware of that comes up in this chapter, and I think is really important, is BATNA. What's your BATNA? And if you don't know what BATNA is yet, you haven't done your reading. So I would encourage you to go back to your textbook and read about BATNA, because it really is very important to understand. And BATNA is, here's the cheat sheet, but I do want you to read your text, is the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. The best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So I come in with what I want. Of course, I want what I want. We all do. That's human nature. I want what I want. But I know if I'm coming to a conflict, if I'm coming to a negotiation, if I'm coming to sit down to talk about it, probably not going to get what I want. That'd be great if I did, but I have to be willing to give up a little bit. So my BATNA is my best alternative to a negotiated agreement. What can I live with? What is the most I can give up? If I can't give that, then I'll compromise to here. What is that moment, that place where I can no longer compromise? Emotionally, physically, because of my role, because of whatever is there, what is that back end that I can't give up anymore? And remember, your BATNA is your secret. You keep it to yourself. You don't walk in and say, I'd really like this, but I'll handle this. Can we be done? Because I guarantee that under the right circumstances, your alternate party is going to go, okay, done. I'll take the lower bid. You could get more from the deal. So you don't want to violate what you could get out of it either. So keep your BATNA to yourself. But know what it is and have done your homework to be prepared to know what it is when you come up there. It is extremely frustrating. Sometimes it's still going to happen because you don't know what the other party is going to bring to the table. But it can be extremely frustrating when the other party has, I don't know, I have to think about it. I don't know, I have to think about it. I don't know, I have to think about it. And this drags on forever. How many times do we have to go through this conflict? Conflict isn't fun. We don't feel good when we go into a conflict. We don't want to keep revisiting it if we don't have to revisit it. So both parties should do their homework and do their homework in advance. It is important that we don't ignore our feelings, and conflicts will likely stir up feelings. We don't want to ignore them, but we also don't want to explode with feelings. We want to be able to control them. So what are my feelings? What are the emotions I have when I'm dealing with this conflict that are associated with this conflict? Know it, own it, and control it. So something that can help us as well in preparing for a conflict is a SWOT. For those of you who've done IDS 4170, you are already familiar with the SWOT and have done a SWOT. And for those of you who have not, we will be doing a SWOT in IDS 4170. So here again, you see where some of those lessons are going to be repeated. SWOTs are very, very helpful. Now in 4170, we really focus on that with business growth and goals. But SWOTs can be used at any time to really help us to assess and deeply assess a situation. So if we're looking at a conflict, we might want to use a SWOT. What are the strengths that are in there? What are the threats? What are the weaknesses? And what are the opportunities? So as I go into this conflict, what are the strengths that we bring in? What is the positives I'm bringing into this thing? What are the threats to me directly that I need to be prepared for? What are the weaknesses that we have? And what are the opportunities that could come out of this conflict? Remember, conflict isn't bad in and of itself. Conflict is an opportunity to look at, there's a problem here, and we need to find a resolution that's happy for anybody. Conflict isn't fun. I didn't say it was fun, but we frequently won't change or won't even evaluate or won't even look to change until there's a problem. And when that problem creates itself, we take a look and go, are we doing what we should be doing? Is there more we should be doing? There could be opportunities out there every day that we miss just because we do things the way we've always done them. We keep status quo. So that conflict, that thing that came up, gave us an opportunity to look at that situation to determine, are we doing the best? If we have the right attitude about conflict. And attitude is going to be up to you. So a SWOT is really helpful. Something else that can be helpful is a cost-benefit analysis. So really just two columns. What is the cost? What's going to happen here, and what are the benefits to this conflict? And really looking at the conflict itself. Coming forward to take on and address this conflict. What are the costs to me? What could happen? What could I lose? If I'm willing to come into this conflict, what could be the loss? And am I prepared for it? What could be the benefit? And am I prepared for it? If you can't handle the loss, don't come. You're not ready. So those are things to keep in mind. I do want you to take an opportunity as well in your readings to review the opportunistic employee. Those are going to take advantage in ways that you can help to work with those people as well. And finally, what are the steps to resolution? I'm going to give you a couple clear, concrete steps before we end here. And the first one is being able to define who owns the problem. What is the problem? Who's directly involved? Whose problem is it? Who owns it? Second is to research and to reflect. What are the real facts of the case? Doing our homework. Not the assumptions, not the feelings, but what are the real facts? And in this time, you want to reflect as well. What is your role in it? And what are the feelings that you bring to the table? Sometimes, particularly if you're in a boss role, an administrator role, something like that, you may have feelings on the subject, but they may or may not be relevant to the conflict. You don't have to like the answer at the end of the day, but what is my job in resolving it? So remember that sometimes you're just going to have to check your own personal feelings at the door. And keep in mind, are there things in my own belief set, in my own feelings, in my own emotions that are interfering with my ability to resolve this conflict for what it is? So that's something we want to look at. The third is the alternatives. Are there any alternatives? Have I really looked at that? Alternatives might be things like, can I just change my attitude? I have this feeling about the thing, but other people don't have that same feeling. What if I just kind of change my attitude? What if I was okay with this? I like working 9 to 5. They like working 10 to 6. Is it worth the conflict? Is it that big of a deal? What if I was okay with it? Would everything just go away? Maybe 10 to 6 isn't so bad. Maybe I'm stuck in my ways. A second time would be, can you change your environment? There are times when you're addressing a conflict that if you can just walk away, if you can ignore it, if you don't have to be involved in it, then maybe that's the easiest solution. If you don't like a particular coworker, but you don't have to work with them, don't work with them. It doesn't have to be exploded past that. Now, sometimes it does. Sometimes we do need to have the conflict, but let's get rid of the ones we don't need to have. But if we do, then we're going to move forward into that third step, and we're going to be prepared to deal with that conflict in a healthy way. And when we do that, we're going to rehearse. We're going to rehearse, we're going to practice, we're going to have done our homework, and we are going to be ready to move forward with that conflict when it comes to that time. And when it comes to that time, we're going to select a mutual time for both parties or all parties that is fair to everybody. We're not going to jump on somebody when they're not prepared. We're going to give them the opportunity to do their homework. We're going to do our homework. We're going to have a planned meeting in a neutral spot with neutral environment so that nobody feels defensive right from the bat. If you attack somebody and you start off that way, you're not going to get the healthy conflict resolution that you want. And finally, remember, when you come to that conflict, your job is not to preach to them or to convince them to have your ways, but to talk about the concern and what would be a healthy way, not to convince them they have to think your way. That would be nice, and maybe after dealing with the facts they will, but kind of check that and deal with the facts of the case. And so remember to do that. You're not there to preach, you're there to talk about it and find a mutual solution. Also, you want to make sure that you leave your anger at home and any frustration you have, leave it at home. Don't bring it to the conflict. And be sure to use things like I statements. You did this, you did this, you did this is probably not the best way to start. However, I have noticed, I am concerned, something that's come up for me is going to get you a whole lot further. And remember, once you've resolved that conflict, be sure to check in afterwards. Follow up. Make sure that conflict resolution is working. It's sticking. Did we miss anything along the way? Do we need to go back and capture any pieces that we missed? We want it to be successful. You don't want to put all that effort in and it all fall apart. So I hope these have been helpful. Remember, your handbook is there, your teachers are there, and I wish you many happy conflict resolutions in the future.